Greetings, Sharon. Welcome to Life Talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Hope you're keeping all the eh?
I am doing well. I hope you are doing well yourself.
I'm doing very fine. Now, as you already know, people have different desires in life. Some people desire to live in life in a certain way, and which might be totally different from the next person. But one thing I realized about all our desires is that yes, we might have different desires in life, but there is something that is in common that lies in the shadows of our desires, which is the aspect of personal responsibility. Now, what's your view and what's your take on the aspect of taking personal responsibility to achieve the life that you want to achieve?
I just think that a lot of us have grown up in this age where we are working for rights. We're working for human rights. I'm entitled to this. I'm entitled to that. So we grow up thinking that everything we want and need should just happen naturally because we've been through this age where we're fighting for rights, but never for responsibilities. And I think that the more responsibility you take for your own life, the more satisfied you will be with the life that you're living. If you don't take responsibility for it, no one is going to solve your problems for you. No one is going to bring to fruition the desires that you have. I think a lot of times also we have this misconception that life is about seeking happiness. And so if I'm seeking happiness, I should indulge in those things that make me happy. And I should just live in a life of pleasure alone. And sometimes that means sleeping in for more than 10 hours. Okay, it's eating junk food all the time. It's staying and playing FIFA all day and night and not doing anything that actually requires you to put in work. And that sucks because people don't like responsibility. No one wants to get out of bed, make the food. No one wants to get out of bed, study. But we want a degree. You know what I mean? No one wants to do the fitness work, but you want the summer body. No one wants to go to learn how to drive a car, but you want a license. And it's that like sort of disparity between wanting nice things, but not taking responsibility for how to get those nice things.
Personally, I believe that taking responsibility is not something that is very easy, and that is the reason why many people struggle, or that is the reason why many people have not achieved what they could have achieved, because it is not easy to harness that which you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it and make the things come to reality. It is very difficult for you now to stop talking, because what I've realized is that many people waste much of their time in the talking, in the planning, but when it comes to doing the actual work that is required to live the life or to get the life that they desire, they struggle. So it's one thing to talk about something that you want, and it's another thing to do the things that you're supposed to do. So yes, taking responsibility is very, very difficult. But at the same time, it also comes with a lot of sacrifices. What's your take on the aspect of sacrifices? What is the dose of sacrifice that is required for you to live a life that you want to live?
I think I wouldn't know because, of course, I'm not an expert, and I myself hate making sacrifices. And I think when we speak of sacrifices, to clarify to everyone, it's an issue of delayed gratification sometimes, right? You know you want to do the pleasurable things, but sometimes you need to do the painful things in order to get more results. So for example, I have to study for an exam. I want to sleep. I have a chance to sleep for 10 hours today, but I can delay the gratification of sleeping right now to doing it later while I study right now. And I think the more you delay gratification, the bigger the reward will be. So there's this responsibility to reward ratio, like the bigger the sacrifice you make, the bigger the reward will be as well. But people just don't like to make sacrifices to begin with. So I think what's necessary is to do it bit by bit. Learn to make those sacrifices. We're not conditioned to live under pain. We don't like pain. We are animals that just like to chill and, enjoy pleasure. But the moment you start to put yourself in a situation where you are foregoing those things that you enjoy so much, you kind of don't like those feelings. So you have to do it bit by bit. And I think as you progress and do it incrementally, you get to a point where you start to make bigger sacrifices over longer periods of time, and you will start to see those rewards. So yeah, I think the bigger the sacrifice, the bigger the reward. The less, especially for people who are studying, for example, right? The less you sleep and study, the less you go out partying and study, the more you're going to get results from study. Hopefully you're studying smart, or else you're wasting your time. And the same is true for like a person who's trying to start a business, right? Before you even get into that, you want to do your research, you want to do your business proposals, you want to find funding. And sometimes that means speaking to many people, pitching your idea to a lot of people, and not having to hang out with your friends for a bit. And those are the sacrifices you have to make until you get the reward that you're looking for. And of course, when you get your reward, you can do all those other things that you've been wanting to do for the longest time.
I don't know whether I should say unfortunately or fortunately, but it seems like we're living in an era whereby almost everything is given to us on a silver platter. Nowadays, it's very easy for us to access some things as compared to back then. Because back then, for them to get the things that you can get now easily, they had to work their backs off, literally, to get what you can get now very easily. So I think in as much as it's good that way, but it has also brought upon it a burden in the sense that it has literally eroded the work ethics in many people. And it has shelled them in a comfort zone, especially for the young people. Let me say that. Many young people today, they are caught in the comfort zone. And as we all know, it's very difficult for you to achieve the life that you want to achieve if you're in a comfort zone. You have to live out of your comfort zone. So what are some of the steps that you can advise your viewers that they can use or take to live out of their comfort zones?
I think the first thing, before you even start to make these plans, before you start to make the sacrifices, you have to define for yourself what it is that you want out of the sacrifices you're about to take, out of the efforts that you're about to take. You have to define for yourself very clearly, for that matter, what it is you want to get out of it. So that means setting goals that are specific for you, the SMART goals. And I know it might sound cliche that, set SMART goals before you do anything, but it's very important because it defines for you how much effort you have to put in, right? So if I say I'm trying to get a distinction on this particular subject, that means the effort that I put into going to class, studying, taking extra notes, visiting a lecturer during, visitation hours, it's going to be so much more than if I was just looking for a C. So the goal that you set for yourself sort of defines the efforts that you need to put into. Also, and I need to stress this, taking responsibility doesn't mean it's going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of moments where you hate what you're doing. You hate that you're missing out on the things that your friends are doing. Maybe you've set such a big goal for yourself. I'm trying to get this much money within this year, right? Which means you're doing extra work. Maybe you've taken on 3 side jobs and you've got a side hustle that you're putting into. And that means you can't hang out with your homies. The goal is to remember why you started so that it maintains your motivation throughout the work. And sometimes you won't have motivation, so don't rely on motivation. You want to rely on the reason for which you started to put in that effort. And after you've outlined for yourself the specific thing that you want, and it has to be meaningful to you, right? You're not doing it for Instagram. You're doing it for yourself. And a lot of times we want to do things for Instagram. I want to travel so that I can snap pictures and show people on Instagram. I want to get married so that I can show people in my friends group that I'm the first one to get married. It's all for the wrong reasons. But if you can define for yourself the right reason, you have a reason, right, to keep going. And then the second thing that I think is super important after that is to make a plan. You have to make a plan. Like, I know in high school, I don't know if Mrs. Mike ever taught you, but in her classroom, she had a poster on the wall that said, if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And I always remind myself that whenever I'm trying to venture into something, it's because if you don't have a plan for yourself, you also don't know what kind of sacrifices you need to make under that plan. You don't know what efforts you need to put in. And when we say sacrifice, it's really the kinds of effort that you have to put in that requires a whole lot more from you than necessary, right? Otherwise, if it was easy, we would all be doing it. So you define for yourself the thing that you're aiming for and why you're aiming for it. And then you define a plan of how to get to that particular aim or how to achieve that particular goal. And then within that plan, you realize which sacrifices you need to make for yourself. But you don't just make sacrifices blindly. I think it's also super important to define for yourself the kind of reward you'll give yourself for having achieved some of the responsibilities that you outline. So it's very important that once you have actually ticked off something, that you wanted to achieve, maybe your goal, you need to reward yourself with something that makes you happy, in that moment, because that balance between responsibilities and rewards then makes the work so much more enjoyable instead of feeling like you're in a prison.
I think what you've highlighted is a very critical point, but sadly, many people, even up to this day, they struggle with the aspect of celebrating themselves, no matter how small the success is. But I think it's very vital for one to celebrate themselves, because it has a lot of advantages. It also boosts your confidence and also make you feel good about yourself. So it's very good for us to enjoy and celebrate ourselves whenever we achieve something. But going back to the aspect you're talking about of defining the life that you want, would you equate that to be the same as defining what success means to you? Because the definition of success differs from person to person, right? But I realize the mistake that many people make is that they define their success on the basis of the societal definition of what success is. That is the reason why you find some people doing some certain things for the wrong reason, because they do not even have a definition of success. Secondly, you also indicated the aspect of working smart. Can you just elaborate that in further detail, please?
Okay, so I'll start with this working smart bit, and then we'll move on to like defining what success means for you. So I think working smart is being very conscientious about what you want and what's the easiest way to get there. I believe in not wasting energy. That's just my motto. I always tell I have mentees under a program that I'm a part of as a mentor. And I always tell them, listen, you want to do the one thing that requires minimal effort. And this is actually like advice that I got from another mentor under the same program, who said to me, you want to put in minimum effort to get maximum output. And so working smart is making sure you expend the least amount of energy, but enough energy for you to get the result that you're looking for. So like, for example, let's see, if you're studying, right, you could just sit down at a desk, open your notebook, maybe you have slides from your lecturer, open your textbook, start reading for the next 3 hours and don't stop, right? Whereas you haven't taken into consideration the fact that you have an attention span, right? Your attention span is going to dwindle as you're studying. So you haven't factored in taking breaks within your studying. You also haven't factored in the necessary amount of physical energy that's needed in you rejuvenating your mind, so you're not forgetting what you're reading. So a person who works smart will kind of figure out what's the best way to study. How do humans function? How do humans have attention spans? And so you sit down and you figure out for yourself, what's the longest amount of time that I can read for without losing my attention span completely, and for most people it's like 35 minutes. So you study for 35 minutes and you take a 10-minute break. And then you study for another 35 minutes and you take a 10-minute break. That way you're preserving your attention span and you're not wasting time. So it's you actually taking research to figure out what is needed for me to get the best results, and then making sure you put in that work succinctly for those best results. I hope I answered that correctly.
Can you bring more clarification on the aspect of working smart? Somebody can easily misinterpret that and take it as if you're encouraging taking shortcuts, because you indicated a point that you should do things that would at least make you get something quickly with maybe less effort in less time. Somebody can easily think that you're encouraging shortcuts. Would you please clarify that and bring more clarity on that point?
So the person who takes a shortcut, their priority is not wasting time. It's not wasting energy. It's just to get the job done. And whatever the result is, whether it's good or bad, you just want to get the job done. So you don't care about the standard and the quality of the output that you give. But what I'm talking about always speaks about bringing about the best impact. Like I said, it's putting minimum effort to get maximum output. And like you said, it then comes down to how do you define maximum output for yourself? And of course, there are standards and levels. You know that maximum output academically is an A. So you want to put in the least amount of work, thinking about how can I maximize the things that I have, my resources, myself, my lecturers, my friends, study groups, the internet. How do I use those things in the best possible way so that I can get an A? And the A is the maximum output. So a shortcut doesn't really care about the output. You just want to get the job done as quickly as possible. But what I'm talking about uses the resources that you have in a way that is methodical and calculated so that you get maximum output. And of course, that comes down to your question about how do you define what maximum output is or what success is for yourself, you know? And for me personally, like you said, people define it differently. Sometimes it's how many followers you get on Instagram, right? It's how many people look at you on Instagram and they give you comments of, wow, you're so inspirational. And you think, wow, okay, I'm a success. And sure, if that's your definition of success, good on you. You have that autonomy to define for yourself what success is. But for me personally, I think it's really tied to what your purpose is as a person. I think a lot of times, because I'm Christian, I believe that everything that I do is sort of ordained by God. And it's possible for me to live a life that is not in God's will, but it's also possible for me to live a life that is in God's will. And I think the idea of purpose for those who are religious would be, what is the will of God over my life, right? And for those who might not be religious at all, it's really, how do I make my life as meaningful as possible? How do I find meaning in the things that I do? So you can define success based on worldly standards or based on maybe things that in your family people have never achieved before. Maybe you're the first one to go to university, you're the first one to start your own business. That might be success for you. But for me personally, it's living a life of meaning and a life of purpose.
All right, thank you very much, Sharon, for sharing some wisdom with us. We hope to have you next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I think what you're doing is really amazing. And I hope that you continue to have these conversations with young people, because I don't think we have enough of these conversations. So well done to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.